Hello, Eben.
Hello, Bob.
It's great to see you. I'm I'm in Rome, and you are in Copenhagen.
Yeah, I wish I was in Rome
Oh, we've had
instead of.
terrific downpours every day. We did have sunshine up until now, but it's clouding over, and about 5 or 5:30, it starts to rain, and it rains till about 7 or 8 at night.
Hmm. That's
We've
quite
got
unusual for June in Rome. Normally, it's really sunny and very hot.
Yeah. So I don't understand. Maybe the world is out of joint. Uh, I think you and I wanted to discuss being writers and what that process is of listening, hearing, thinking, seeing, and then transmitting that into writing and then leaving that for posterity. Do you have any insights into the nature of writing and being a writer?
Yes, I tried to be a writer for more than 20 years, so I have a little experience. And writing is hard work, actually. And I think every writer would agree. You're also a writer. Do you find it easy to write? I don't. What is your experience, Bob?
Good question. I have to say that I start with almost a listening and sort of thinking, what is it that I know that I want to communicate? And sometimes it's easy. And then other times the process itself is difficult. And as I prepare to write and begin to write and then look at what I've written, I finally understand what it is I wanted to say. So I would say it's neither easy nor hard, but it's an oscillation or a spectrum between having a sense of what I want to say, sometimes easy, and what I want to say, sometimes understanding only through the process.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes you have an idea in mind, or you know exactly in your head what you want to communicate. When you start to write, it comes out differently, or it's like you can't hit the right music or the right tone in what you want to say. So sometimes you have to rewrite it a couple of times before you finally get into the full understanding of what you really are trying to say. Because thinking about something and understanding something is not the same thing as writing it down on a piece of paper or, writing on your laptop. It's not the same. And it's a very creative process. And you completely right that you get an inspiration while you write, and I think that is some kind of divine element, or it is a divine element to every writer, that you sort of you know gets you are receiving gifts while you write. And you got to
Mm.
be very concentrated, or very, I would say, you have to be very receptive. You have to be open to to receive something when you write, depending on what you're writing, of course. If you are writing something that is not about the truth, or you're writing other things, I don't know how that is. But another thing I find very hard being a religious writer is that if you want to address a secular audience, which is, I mean, the main part of the Western world today, or the Western culture, sometimes you have a feeling that you cannot be sure that people would understand what you're trying to communicate, because they have a different worldview. And I
Mm.
find that quite um, hard sometimes, because if you write only for Catholics that knows exactly what the church is all about, what the faith is all about, they know your language, it's quite easy to communicate things. But if you're trying to address Western culture at large, I think it's sometimes you have you get the feeling that people won't understand what you're saying. But maybe I'm wrong. But I think it is a I think it's a very I think it is a challenge right now, if you are a religious writer, to connect with the wider audience, which is very secular minded.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned three things we can explore further. You've said the writer is a receptor in a way, receiving some impulses, maybe from the divine or from the world around us, that we transmit. So we are a kind of receptor, almost as if we're receiving insights, words, ideas that then we accept, we put down, and we share. And then you said, as we do that, as we try to share something like a gift that we have received, we try to share it, we must use and choose a form, a language which can be received, and we're concerned that what we try to share will be in the wrong language and won't be understood, won't be received, or that it will be in that we'll be sharing it in a language that's known so well that it will be discounted in a sense that won't be new. Is that a kind of summary of what you just said?
Yeah, I think it is. Yes, but of course, it depends on what you're writing. I think if you are a very creative writer or you're open to be a receptor, it's a different thing from if you want to control your own writing. It depends on what you're writing. I think many journalists today, they know exactly what they want to, I mean, the kind of thing they want to write about, or they want, or the message they have. It really depends on what you're writing. But if you look at the understanding of art before the Renaissance, the artist was like a tool or a channel for divine inspiration, because what an artist was supposed to convey was, you know, the good, what is true and what is beautiful. This was the understanding of art. Today, many artists are actually, you know, trying to display things that are ugly, things that are dark, which are not very beautiful and which may not be true. So, you know, I don't know whether they have been receptive of something. Maybe they have opened themselves to evil powers. I don't know. But it really depends on what kind of, you know, faith you have or how open you are to inspiration. Later on, after the Renaissance, um, the understanding of what an artist is completely changed, because then you start to talk about that the artist was a genius, meaning that he was the own creator of his own art, which is probably what we are also, I mean, the understanding of art we have today, that you're not a vessel, so to say, of divine inspiration. And I think art is only really extraordinary when you are open to that inspiration. Inspiro in Latin means that something is being breathed into you, into your soul, and then you get this gift, and you're able to share it with other people, to make them understand better what is goodness, what is beauty, what is, you know, truth. And I don't think we have that kind of understanding of art anymore. Now, I mean, the human being is the center of the world. We're very self-centered, and it's only our subjective world view that is valid, not what we have been given from above or some kind of objective truth. Now it's only our own subject that is the center of the world. And I think that's a huge change. So it really depends on whether you try to open yourself to divine grace or to divine inspiration while you write, or you just have your own worldview that you want to convey.
Well, you've touched really on some very interesting points about what a person is when he writes, when she writes, what the message is they're trying to communicate, and whether they are the source of that message or just a vessel for communicating it from somewhere else. It's reminiscent in some ways of the debate over scripture itself, written by men, but not said to be inspired by men's thoughts, inspired by God. We
Exactly.
call it, yeah. And then whether art participates in that, and whether even the writings that a journalist or an essayist produces are also influenced in that way. I do feel that we play some sort of role as intermediaries between an objective truth, an objective beauty, an objective goodness that we have glimpsed or we have sought to glimpse. And then we have seen parts of it that we think we can communicate, and that we do that when we describe some historical event, some person, some conflict. But all of this is still kind of murky here. Are we, what is the essential nature of the task of the writer? What are we, do we have a message that we have glimpsed that we want to communicate?
Yeah, of course, we're not robots. I mean, we're just not machines that are being told what to do. We have a free will. So, what is really important to stress is that whenever you receive a divine inspiration, it's always a cooperation between this particular human being and what is given to this particular human being by God. And I guess the Bible, like you just mentioned, is a very good example. It's written by men, but it's divine inspiration. But it has come out through, a human being that has put his hand down on paper and has written it. And it's really important that divine grace, like Saint Thomas of Aquinas says, grace builds on nature. It means whenever you get a grace, it will be mixed up with your nature, and your free will is extremely important to make it work. So it's not that I mean, we need to consent to that kind of inspiration. I mean, it's not just something that we are being sort of, instructed to do without our free will. That's not the way it works with God. I think that's really important. And that is also what it makes so beautiful, is that God invites us to participate in his plans. I mean, God doesn't need us, but he invites us to work with him because he likes us. I mean, he likes to give us gifts and to cooperate with us and to share with us, because his nature is love. And this is what makes it so beautiful, when a person is accepting that invitation and is doing something from God. Yet, we still have our own individuality, and our own person is completely, fully complete. So I think that's very important to stress for. I mean, when we talk about what is Christian inspiration, that it is like a cooperation with God a cooperation between God and man. And then, of course, so the divine inspiration would always be filtered through your reason, through your mind. I think Thomas Aquinas could say a lot more about this than me. He would be an expert in that. That we have this light given by our faith, but it is going through our reasoning. And that when we as writers are trying to write a story or write an article, an essay, we can be open to that light we're being given to enlighten our reason, so we can write something that is enlightened by our faith or by God's inspiration. But still, we have to use reason. I think that is also, a core principle in our Christian thinking, is that faith and reason go together. I mean, faith without reason is really dangerous, and reason without faith is also extremely dangerous. I mean, Pope Benedict said a lot about this. So I think faith and reason is really important when you write. But if you only write with reason and your own mind, it's going to be a completely different story than if you allow your faith and God to enlighten you. So you have this light. And I think that's very important.
Well, Eben, once again, you take things to a new level, and I'm always impressed speaking with you. Your mind is wide, capacious, and you're grasping very important things. And you've now sparked in me a news story which came out 6 days ago. And it has to do with inspiration, scripture, writing something inspired and beautiful, and whether human beings can do it or whether it requires artificial intelligence. Can I summarize this story for you?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
There's a man, there's an Israeli thinker. He's called a public intellectual, Yuval Noah Harari. He's an influential author, professor, and so-called public intellectual. He said last week that artificial intelligence can create a, quote, new Bible. He is the author of a book called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. So he's trying to think of things in the big picture. And he's written another book called Homo Deus. I've mentioned this before. Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. And the essential phrase here, homo means man, deus means God. So man, God, A Brief History of Tomorrow. It's a description of his vision of how humanity can be transformed into a divinity, into a God. And he then went to talk about the scriptures just 6 days ago. And this is what he said. The artificial intelligence is the first technology ever that can create new ideas. You know, the printing press, radio, television, they broadcast. I'm reading from him. They spread the ideas created by the human brain, by the human mind. They cannot create a new idea, he says. He then continues, you know, Johannes Gutenberg printed the Bible in the middle of the 15th century, so the 1450s. The printing press printed as many copies of the Bible as Gutenberg instructed it, but it did not create a single new page. It had no ideas of its own about the Bible. Is it good? Is it bad? How to interpret this? How to interpret that? And then he said, quote, and this has been all over the press. Maybe you haven't seen this, but this has been reported many places. Quote, AI, that is artificial intelligence, can create new ideas. It can even write a new Bible, close quote. Then he concludes here, throughout history, religions dreamed about having a book written by a superhuman intelligence, by a non-human entity, close quote. And that quote, in a few years, there might be religions that are actually correct. Just think about a religion whose holy book is written by an artificial intelligence, by an AI. That could be a reality in a few years, close quote, he said. What do you think of that, Eben?
Well, I don't understand all the fuss about AR, because I think it is artificial. And in the end, it will not satisfy the human soul. And why should, we can just pull the plug. I mean, why should we fear this artificial intelligence? Because it only exists as long as we allow it to exist. We can just pull the plug. I know it's very simplified what I say, but I think people nowadays don't want to believe in God. So why should they want to believe in a book that is written by artificial intelligence? I see it more like a political sort of manifest, but not a religious manifest.
Fantastic. Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
because everybody who has seen a text, I sometimes use artificial intelligence because it can be a really great tool and can be very helpful as a writer, give you ideas. It can sum up some research you're doing, things, but it's so clear that there is no soul in the text. It's dead. So you can only use the text if you sort of rewrite it with your own soul. It's not alive, and it will never get this soulish thing. So it of course it's very intelligent because it sort of puts all things together from the internet, everything it has been programmed to do. But so far, artificial intelligence cannot think beyond what is being instructed to do. You still
Absolutely.
need to have this kind of, you need to tell it what to do, and you need to be very specific, as it is now. So the command you give it is very dependent on the quality of what you get out of it. So if you give it poor information about what you want, the result is very poor as well. So you still need, it's like riding a horse. You still need to know where to go, and you need to be in control. Otherwise, the tool won't work.
Well,
So I don't know whether we could accept a new religion from artificial intelligence when it's something basically that we want to tell it to do. And, it's just the same old original sin being repeated over and over again, that we can become like God, and we can become like the serpent said to Eve. I mean, you can become like God. It didn't tell, actually, the serpent didn't say to Eve, there is no God. He says, God is this and that. He tried to make Eve get an image of God that was not true. And this is the same thing that is going on again and again and again. So it's just the same old lie being repeated on a new level. But I really don't think it's going to have a huge impact, because in the end, we have this image of God in our soul, and human mankind cannot forget that. Despite Satan's, he's really trying to very hard to make us forget everything about God. I don't think it's possible. And to a certain extent, I don't think God will allow it. So, yeah, of course, it can be dangerous, but I think I'm not so afraid of it as many people are, because I think it still is going to be very limited what it can do in the end.
Well,
It all depends on the way that we decide to use it, like our iPhones and our laptops and Facebook and Instagram. You are still in charge of the way you use it. And if you don't want to use it, you're still a human being.
yeah. Well, even as I don't think you would be afraid of it. I know you have the Viking spirit
No, I
from
don't.
from the Nordic countries. Yes, you do. But what I really wanted to say was that Harari's idea is silly.
Yes, but the Soviet Union tried to build a nation for 70 years completely without God, and they denied God. The same has been happening in China. God still exists. Many people still do believe in God, and even during the Soviet time, many people were still going for services and mass underground, secretly. So I don't really think that artificial intelligence would do away with God. I don't think so. Because I think, like I said before, it has no soul and will never get a soul because it's artificial. It might be bright, it might be intelligent, it might be able to give us new ideas, but in the end, it has no soul. It has no soul.
Well,
It's
that's
not it's not alive.
I agree with you. Even so, what we are seeing at the highest levels of what some people are calling the New World Order or the Global Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, at the level of the ideological vision, it wishes to propose an old falsehood and it wishes to avoid at all costs the old truth. Let's restate that again. What is the old falsehood that you just referred to in the Garden of Eden? And what is the truth, which is instead the opposite of that lie?
Well, the serpent wanted Adam and Eve to believe that they could become like God. And this is exactly what's happening today, that we think that we can be God with artificial intelligence or the Great Reset, or whatever people have in mind, people at the top level, but they won't succeed. It will come crumbling down. Nobody had imagined that the Soviet Union could fall apart. It did. And the reset might gain some control for some years, but it will come crumbling down. History
Well,
tells us that everybody who tried to, get away with God or turn their back on God, they have fallen themselves. So I
yeah,
don't think I really think we are so. Even many Christians are so afraid of all this, and of course, it is a danger, and these people are evil. So we should really be very afraid of it, or care about it. I would say care about it, or concerned about it. That's the right word. We should be concerned about it. But
well,
as we speak, if you read the Bible, everybody who was full of pride and thought that they could replace God, they were crushed sooner or later. History shows that. So
yeah.
I think we should muster up a little bit more faith in
Hmm.
that God cannot be, conquered by man. He cannot.
Yeah. Well, two things that you just said prompted me to think. First, you said they will not win but they might have some power for some time. And my first thought was, well, why give them any power for any time if they're proposing such silly ideas? And the
Well,
second thing,
maybe, but maybe God is allowing this as some sort of chastisement. Have you thought about that? Because we are living in the time of the great apostasy, even within the church. So maybe God needs, maybe God is allowing this. I don't say that God wants this. I say maybe God allows this to put us through some kind of test or some kind of trial. He has done that before and he can do that. But it's not because he wants that, but this is the way the world goes without him, or the way that we have turned our back on him. So maybe sometimes God allows things to test us. Maybe this
hmm,
is the reason why we cannot really. Um, I wouldn't say that that we cannot prevent it, because of course we can. If you know if there were enough good people that wanted to prevent it, it would be prevented. But maybe they're not, so we have to deal with that.
well, the problem is that if they're rewriting the Bible and proposing it as the perfect book, no longer with the strange imagery of Isaiah with the hot coal on his tongue, purifying him to speak the word of God, but some type of algorithm that produces very simple and clear
That's what
sentences.
that is exactly what the Communist Party in China has already done. They have rewritten the Bible, so they have left out things that are not appropriate for the communist regime. It has already been done. But I really don't think that it's going to threaten the Bible as it is today, because there will still be thousands and millions of copies of books, physically books, printed books that will be around. So I really, I don't, it's just ridiculous. This idea that they can rewrite the Bible. There will be so many people who won't buy it. Come on, Robert. Nobody wants to buy that. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, I would say that you're correct up to a point, even, but once people are slowly distanced from the concept of the transcendent or of their own freedom and dignity, and they start to join in some type of a fad, and they'll say, here's a book that says you should be nice at 9 o'clock, and then someone will be nice to you at 10 o'clock, and then you should eat just one piece of asparagus at noon. In other words, we may get some cooking instructions, some nutritional instructions. We'll probably get instructions of where to go and what to do, how many hours to sleep, and what to think about. And people will say, oh, now we have a good life.
I think people would think it's so awful, so that they will start to read the true Bible, because this is actually what happened in the former communist countries. This is communism. What you're just talking about is communism. And we already tried that. Now we have the second coming of Marxism, the second coming of communism, which might be worse than the first coming of Marxism that we
Hmm.
saw in 1917 with the Russian Revolution. This one might be harder because the technology is so much more advanced than it was at the first revolution. And you're right, but it is communism. And communism will fail. We've seen that already in the Soviet Union. It will fail. And the church will rise again. But maybe it's going to be a hard time. I agree with you. But I don't believe that this is the end of it.
All right. Well, what the impression I have is that you are very brave, but you're allowing too much space for some decade or 7 years or 40 years to go by with people in authority telling other people what to do that will be against what we know is right and true and good and
But Bob,
beautiful.
it is too late already, because the church has been asleep. It is too late. All these people who think that if they just get Trump into the White House again, and if we just have a new political leader that can stand up against it, they're wrong. It's too late, because the church has been too relaxed for decades, and now we see the consequence of it. So we got to deal with that. It's got to, it is probably only the remnant that is going to save the world. But I
Well,
mean, I mean, there is
Yeah.
so much division in the Catholic Church and in all other churches around the world. There is so much disagreement, so much, dissension. It's terrible. So I guess it's our own fault that is happening.
Hmm.
And I don't, and to be honest with you, I don't see any powers within the church rising up against this at the moment.
Well,
Okay, yeah, look, okay, there are a few voices like you and other, but it's very few people. I mean, the majority of Catholics are asleep.
Eben, I didn't expect you to say this.
But they are asleep, and
All
they
right.
don't understand at all.
So,
I see people going for mass every day, and they don't have a clue about what's going on, I think.
okay, so what you're saying is there's a danger threatening us of God being taken away and another false sort of maybe even computer generated God being given to us and people bowing down. And yet you're saying it won't win, but it's too late to prevent it from happening for a certain period of time, which will be a period of great
Looks like that.
sadness.
It looks like that.
Okay, so that's your main message right now. And I think I agree with you, actually. That's why I'm talking to you. Now, what
Well,
do we do?
I mean, most countries are now open to the idea that you should be able to have an abortion up until the moment of birth. I mean, if you have a culture like that, that is child sacrifice. It's very satanic. So how do you think that a culture like that can save itself, and you fight for good when you are sacrificing children up until the moment of birth? Even here in Denmark now, normally it was week 12 and not beyond that. Now they're talking about stretching that up until at least week 24, I think. But in America, in some states, you can have an abortion whenever you want, and you don't even, I mean, the child does not even have to be sick. If you have a culture like that, and a culture who does not know anymore what is a woman and what is a man, and the church is just actually promoting the idea that we should be tolerant towards this kind of ideologies, I mean, there is really little hope right now that we see, this movement of goodness, because it's very evil what's happening on a daily basis, and people don't do anything about it. They just accept it.
Hmm. Let's go back to the other side of the equation. You talked about being inspired by God, by what is true, good, and beautiful. What is the message that we have that we struggle to proclaim about the existence of a reality that transcends our minds and transcends our natural world that we call God, a spirit, and not a physical being? What is this being? Why is God important? Where is he? And how do we speak of him in a way that can be persuasive?
Yeah, I was on a radio program the other day doing a debate about how, because the Danish Protestant church, which is a state church, is in a kind of crisis. It has been for many years. And we were talking about how to communicate the Christian message or the gospel to modern people who are outside the church and is, not really believers, but maybe they have some kind of fascination. And I don't think that the gospel is difficult to understand. I think what has happened is just that people's hearts are so hardened that they don't want to open up themselves to God's love. I
Well,
mean, I think
just
so.
explain to me what is the gospel?
Well, that you were created in the image of God. God loved the world so much that he sent his only begotten son, Jesus Christ, to redeem the world, and he died for our sins. And if you believe in that, you have eternal life, and you have the forgiveness of sin. Everybody can understand that. It's not difficult. I mean, God has made it very easy for us through Christianity, because God became man. We have, God like a human being in Christ that we can relate to. It's very simple. It's very easy. So the idea that and that was not what I was talking about before when I said it was difficult to relate to a secular audience. Well, the reason why it's so difficult to relate to a secular audience is because of arrogance, pride, and hardened hearts. So people are so close to God's love, and this is what is so tragic, is that people have never needed God's love more than in our age, and they're so completely, hardened and full of pride and arrogance and sort of self-occupation. That are so
Hmm.
occupied with themselves. Everybody's seeing a therapist, talking about themselves, only concerned about themselves. You could say it was even narcissistic. So I think it's very hard to relate to a culture that is so self-absorbed. But I don't think, I don't think that the gospel is difficult to understand. It is an eternal message. It can be communicated to any culture, any language. We have seen that because the church is worldwide. Every culture can sort of integrate Christianity into its culture, no matter what kind of background it has. So it's not difficult. What is difficult is man's attitude these days towards the gospel. But I think the writers or the communicators that are completely clear and very solid and very firm in the faith and do not fear man, but instead fear God, and just talking about God and the love of God, eventually there will be a lot of people that would probably be kind of open to it. But if we are trying to please this sort of arrogant spirit by being afraid of it, we're going nowhere.
Okay, even again, you've said wonderful, important things. As I see it, the little pilgrimage that I just carried out with a group of about a dozen people, including mostly Americans, but we went to Assisi, we went to Florence, we went to Norcia, where there's a very interesting young Benedictine monastery in the city where Saint Benedict was born. Saint Benedict of Nursia was born in 480, died in about 550, so he lived right around the year 500, and he created Benedictine monasticism. When Napoleon was conquering Europe, he closed almost all the monasteries by law, and the monastery in Norcia, where Benedict was born, was closed. But some small group of monks, just 3 or 4, went back there about the year 2000. Now there's about 19 of them there, and they pray every day in the monastic style, 7 times a day. And it's on a mountaintop looking over a valley. It's quite impressive. And we went on to Loreto, and then we went on to Manipello. In Manipello, there's a very mysterious image of a man's face who has a big wound on his nose and a big wound on his cheek, and he's got his eyes open, and there's no paint. There's no paint on the linen. No one can figure out how this image was created, and some people are calling it the true Veronica's veil. But I don't bring it up to debate the authenticity or the origin of that veil. What I bring it up is to say there is the news, the good news that a man named Jesus lived, preached, went around doing good, performed evidently some very surprising miracles that astonished the people of his time, that he was arrested, that he was condemned to death, executed, and then after a Saturday Sabbath in between, his followers came to finish his burial, and his tomb was found empty. And the burial clothes, including what some people believe was this cloth, were found in the tomb. And that these were collected, and one was carried for centuries. It got to Constantinople and then came to France and then came to Turin. It's called the Shroud of Turin. And then another was this veil that was kept in Edessa, it is believed, and then eventually came to Europe, was perhaps for some time in the Vatican, and then about 500 years ago came to this little village, Manopello, in Italy. These were possibly in the tomb with Jesus. They have images of a man on them. And it suggests that the story of Jesus was an actual historical event, an execution, a death, and a resurrection with burial clothes left behind. And the church that was founded in his memory and by his will continues after 2,000 years. Many look at it and say, well, that's a kind of marvelous but inevitably corrupt institution that just played the Roman Empire or played the medieval princes or played different games over time and remained. But in fact, objectively speaking, it seems incredible that it could go on for 2,000 years. And it's also produced hospitals, schools, orphanages, all sorts of things over the centuries. This is the church. So the gospel is not a theory, it's not an ideology, it's the story of a man who lived and who then died and then was said to have risen again. Am I correct that this is the gospel?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does this story get communicated?
Just the way you said it now.
All right.
But
Now,
Bob, I just want to come back to what I said before. I don't think we should try to, blame ourselves that we are not got good communicators in our time, because this is what I think. I think that the church has lost some kind of self-confidence. You think, oh, it's because we don't communicate the gospel well enough. That's not the problem. The problem is the spirit of arrogance and pride in our time, and that people have become, people have grown cold towards the love of God because of, multiple sins that they haven't repented of. And now, I sound like, a very traditional Catholic, and I am. And I think that is the problem, that we are dealing with an age where people are extremely arrogant, and they think that they know much better than God. Everybody's seeing some kind of psychologist and some kind of therapist, and what you learn. Psychology is good for many things. It's a great science. It has given us a lot, but the whole idea that psychology can replace religion and the worship of self, and you can learn to master your own life and take control over everything, and you can control your mind and the whole world by the way you're thinking. I mean, that is a very arrogant idea. And everybody is in this kind of worldview. I can control the world. I don't need God. I can just go to a psychologist and get a kind of technique so I can control my misery and what's happening in my life. And that's why people feel have this feeling of meaninglessness, because you cannot do that on your own. I mean, we are created beings. It means that we are dependent on God for our fulfillment. I mean, you cannot be fulfilled by yourself. You know that if you have been in love, you know how much more you feel like yourself if you are in love with the right person. So we need somebody from outside. We need love from outside to be fulfilled. But that's not what psychology is teaching people. It is, you can love yourself to the extent that you can accept yourself and you don't need anybody else. And if you have a whole if you have a whole culture like that, everybody is seeing a therapist whenever they have a problem. They don't go to a priest, they go to a therapist. It creates a sort of culture of arrogance. And they don't want to have anything to do with a God that is telling them something, because they only want to do what they are being told by themselves. So you have this narcissistic culture. And I think, well, we can do whatever we can to try to make them aware of God's love for everybody. And no matter what you have done, you are still loved by God. But like Jesus, I mean, there were people that did not want to listen to Jesus, and they just walked away. They didn't want to hear what he had to say to them. And he was not running after them and say, oh, please, 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 listen to me once more time. He said, okay, if you don't want to listen to me, go ahead. It's your own responsibility. You got the chance, you got the invitation, but unfortunately, you were busy with other things. That is the gospel. I mean, Jesus is not trying to impose anything on anybody. He's telling the truth. And the people who want to listen, they listen. And the people who don't want to listen to him, they walk away. And eventually, in the end, they crucified him because they didn't like what he was telling them. So what can we expect? So I think we should stop blaming ourselves for not being communicators that are doing our job good enough. Maybe it's the culture that has a problem.
Mhm. Well, you've said again two things that are very, very important: that we receive this news or we reject this news, and it strikes me that this artificial intelligence project that was just floated as an idea, but certainly is hiding a more general plan that there will be a proposal, maybe not a Bible, but a whole set of instructions that will be said to have been given by artificial intelligence, by some huge supercomputer very fast that's digested the entire Bible, all the theological and philosophical works. Probably they'll say they digested the Quran, they digested the Bhagavad Gita, the scriptures of many nations, and they'll say, now we are offering the final word. And I just wanted our discussion to touch on this because what you've just said is people have this offer right now and they either accept it or they don't want to accept it. But if it's presented with the type of marketing and the billions of dollars behind it, created perhaps out of nothing, they might convince people that this is the therapy, this is the psychology that will finally make them very content, very happy, and people will accept it. And in that sense, it'll be the greatest trick or deception or delusion thus far. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. That is a possibility. And I guess you're right, it will happen. But maybe that will be the time where people would really need the church because they would realize that they are being tricked into a totalitarian regime where there is no living God. And they will be more and more frustrated and unhappy. And then the church will, you know, offer people what they really need. I mean, look at the church history. Whenever the church has been in an environment where it was persecuted, it was growing. And when times were really getting tough, people came back to the church. That also counts for the Soviet Union, because there was actually a lot of things going on underground with the church during the Soviet era. And I think if this is going to happen, maybe that will be the time where Christians know exactly what to do because they are needed again. Because things will be so awful that people would start to really understand what the gospel has to offer them in a situation like that. So
All
I
right.
think that it could also be something that would be positive for Christianity, because we would really realize how important that message is that God gives us through Christ and through the Bible and through the church, that it will be more needed than ever because people would be suffering.
Eben, you're very brave, and I really appreciate you saying that we should let them bring it on, as it were.
No,
Bring
I'm
on.
not saying, but I'm not saying that. But as I told you before, I don't see right now any movement of goodness in our culture that is capable of trying to prevent this development. I don't see that. So what I'm saying to you is that if eventually it's going to be as bad as you think it's going to be, it might not be the end of the church. That's what I'm saying. There's still hope. I mean, the message of Christianity is that there is always hope. So I'm trying to bring in some hope in your apocalyptic scenario. It is that even though times are getting tough, We have seen before, like in the Soviet Union and also in China, how there's so many Chinese people that are converting to Christianity these years because of the awful society that they're living in. And there is a huge underground movement also in China. And maybe this is what we need in the West. I'm not saying that I hope that we're going to, have this terrible situation. But right now, we are on the brink as a culture anyway, because our misconduct and because we are in this total moral corruption everywhere. Our whole political system is totally and morally corrupt. So there needs to be some kind of cleansing. There needs to be some kind of thing that is going to turn the whole thing around. I don't know what it is, but we cannot go on in Western culture like we do right now. That's evident for everybody.
Yeah, I suppose you should just make more precise what you mean about political corruption. I guess you mean being paid to take decisions that are not good for the future people or for the children, but people take those decisions because they don't care about what's good. They just care about putting money in their pocket. Is that, in essence?
More about that, politics and our culture is not anymore connected to reality and truth. Most of what we are being fed with in the media and on the political scene are lies. Like, for instance, that in America, you don't know what is a woman, what is a man. And that you accept that small children are getting molested by, sex, what do you call this, gender operations or surgery, and that we allow small children to change their gender physically, and
Yeah.
that we're allowing abortion up until the moment of birth. That's evil. That's pure evil.
Okay.
Um, so,
Even,
and then it is presented as women's rights, children's
yeah,
rights. It is presented as something good. That's a lie. It's not
yeah,
good. It's evil. So good are being turned into evil, and evil are being turned into good. We have the whole COVID story. We know that now that we were being told lies. That's evident. Why? Why did we have this whole COVID story? And we were being told lies. Why? What was the whole purpose of that? And I could go on and on. They lied about the Iraq war or the invasion of Iraq. Probably Ukraine, there's also a lot of lies. We don't know because we cannot anymore tell truth from lies. So that's a huge problem, that we're out of reality because we're creating a world that is built on lies. So I think that
that's
is enough evidence that we have this moral corruption. It's not only about money, it's about deceiving people from connecting to reality.
okay. Well, I agree with what you said, even that we are being told many lies. Maybe almost all things we're told are lies. It's reminding me of a sentence that Bill Casey is reported to have said in about 1981. He became the head of the CIA in the United States, and he was a close friend of a man who was the ambassador to the Vatican named Frank Shakespeare, who was a close friend of mine. And it was reported not by Frank, but by others, that Bill Casey has said, "We will know that our work has accomplished its goal when everything that we have presented to people is believed, and when all of it was presented to them, even though it was a lie. So they will have accepted a kind of version of reality and of history which is not true."
But tell me, Bob, what is your suggestion at this moment of in our time? I mean, what do you think should be done?
Well, I
Um,
think the first cornerstone is this discussion you and I are having. And then I'm also talking with several other people, and we're planning to continue the discussions and in our daily lives to return more profoundly than ever to personal prayer, to joining with others in prayer, and to ask for God that His will be done, thy will be done, and that the triumph that He wishes for us, I guess He wishes us to participate in it in some way, will come. And then that we use our reason to analyze closely what it is that the people who are preparing the cages and the locks and the bars for the future prison of our minds, why we can see through that and recognize the danger and give people a warning, shout out a warning, launch a cry, keep the old faith, don't accept this new artificially intelligence uh, projection that they're already telling us they're going to propose, and not accept it because, as you pointed out, it has no soul. It has no person.
Do you really think that the majority of people in the Western culture would accept an artificial intelligence-made religion?
I say it's a danger. Looking
Because
at
I
what
think
we looking
people,
at what we've accepted off, looking at what we've accepted so far, and looking how we accepted week by week, month by month, even contradictory proposals imposed in various countries with the same regulations in every part of the world that were clearly not in keeping with traditional human kindness. Women were not allowed to go see their husbands lying in hospital beds on
no, but
ventilators.
that was because it was imposed on them.
I'm saying we accepted the imposed impositions without revolting.
Because people were afraid of dying, and because they were being fed with a lot of fearful messages. It was fear, out of fear. So of course,
Okay.
if you can make a new religion based on fear, you might be right. But I mean, the reason why people accepted those restrictions was because they were afraid.
Well, okay, you've raised a good point, and we'll have to think about closing this conversation. But I do think the question of what life is, what death is, what true life is, if we have to live on our knees or if we have to live by accepting lies, uh, we may lose the essence of what it means to be alive, which is explaining to some degree, it explains why the Christian martyrs loyal to Jesus Christ were asked to present to the emperor a pinch of incense, just that much between two fingers. Put it on the flame and let it burn in order to worship the emperor as if he were a god. And the early Christians said that would be a rejection of Christ our Lord. We can't do even that little thing. And some people said, are you willing to die and be executed just for a pinch of incense? They said, we would be dead spiritually if we accepted another Lord. And so they did die. They were martyred. But they lived because they never rejected the true principle of their lives. Because human beings are not merely physical. We are also souls. We are spiritual. And if we remain faithful to that which is the deepest and truest and greatest gift, the knowledge of God and of his goodness and of Christ, if we don't reject it and give it up for some artificial intelligent production, we will never be, if we don't give it up, we cannot die spiritually. We will live. This is our message.
Right. The most important thing is not to be spiritually dead. Like Jesus says that we should not be afraid only of him who can, kill the body, but the one that kills the soul. And I think that is very essential, what you say.
Thank you, Eben. So next week, I think we'll come back and talk about the dangers facing us. We'll look at them one by one, and then we'll look at the way the church can rededicate herself, and that how each of us individually, and maybe how you and I and others can somehow share this vision as best we can in the months ahead before the battle reaches its highest point. What do you think?